We're halfway through our program, Keeping the Faith, this afternoon, talking with our guest, Cliff Jackson, talking with him by phone from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Cliff is a recently retired attorney at law. He's had a very interesting past. We talked a little bit about that earlier. We'll get back to talking with Cliff in just a moment. I'm Steve Shoemaker, the usual host for these Keeping the Faith programs. Since we're just the Sunday before Thanksgiving, let me give thanks for some people around here on WILL who've been supportive of this program over the last dozen years or so. I want to particularly thank Jay Pierce, who's no longer here, sadly, with WILL. It was a great tragedy. We lost him to another NPR station in the Quad Cities. But for all 12 and a half years of this program, when Jay was here as program director and other positions, he was quite supportive and helpful over all those years. He was one of the great radio voices and personalities that I've sure ever known in several states. He's was quite a person here at WILL. Jay Pierce, thanks to you. Thanks also to our current Sunday afternoon and Saturday technical director, Kyle Crowe. I've had several technical directors over the 12 years, but I'm thankful for all of them because I have no technical expertise at all. So without them, this would be impossible. Harriet Williamson is currently helping in a production capacity as one of the part-time producer for the show, and appreciate her work as well. And we've had other people who've done that over the years, and I'm thankful again for that help. And of course to listeners who call in and make comments and ask questions and suggest people they'd like to hear, or perhaps even volunteer to be on the show themselves. Although one of my rules over the years generally has been, if you want to be on Keeping the Faith, maybe you shouldn't be. Because people who tend to be evangelists and want to tell everybody what they think, they usually can find a way and have. And so I try to give voice to people who maybe are less heard, less often heard. I might just mention that this show, when it started 12 and a half years ago here on this regional NPR station in Illinois and Indiana, one of the reasons I brought the idea to this station was because, all things considered, didn't really consider religion, belief, spirituality, ethics, values as a topic very often. And I loved listening to NPR. I'd appreciate All Things Considered in many ways, but I was disappointed with their coverage of spirituality and religion. I want to thank the listener who sent me a copy of this week's National Catholic Reporter that has an article in the opinions page, the major article, in fact, called NPR, Not Particularly Religious. This writer, Heidi Schlumpf, talks about public radio's reporting generally neglects people of faith and religion. One of the reasons I think this station was wise in allowing people to call in and talk about these kind of things and be guests on this show once a week is to sort of fill that gap. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity. Coming up on Keeping the Faith, as I mentioned, next week, an archive program from last February on Islam, Forgiveness, and Peace with the guest Dr. Izzeldin Abuleish, author of I Shall Not Hate. He was a visitor here to the Champaign-Urbana community, and I was fortunate to get to hear him speak several times and interview him on the radio. December 4th, I'm still not certain who we're going to have as a guest. We've invited someone, but I don't have a confirmation yet. December 11 is sure. Amy Frickholm, who's a regular writer for the Christian Century, has a new book out called See Me Naked that interviews people about sexuality and their faith. And it's a fascinating book, which I've read, and I think it'll be a good interview December 11. Urbana Chief of Police Patrick Connolly will be our guest here on Keeping the Faith December 18, talking about the police in the community. Chief Pat Connolly has been very active as police chief in visiting the various religious communities in Urbana, trying to visit churches and synagogues and mosques, and as one way to be involved in the community. So we'll be talking about the police in relation to the community with Police Chief Patrick Connolly. Again, that's December 18. Those are some of the programs up ahead on Keeping the Faith. And again, if you've missed part of this program or want to hear previous ones, go to our website, will.illinois.edu/keepinthefaith, and you can listen at your convenience. Well, let's get back to our guest, Cliff Jackson. And again, the phone numbers for those of you who'd like to ask him a question. I'm happy to keep asking questions, but I know other people enjoy that too. 333-9455 in Champaign-Urbana. If it's a long-distance call, 1-800-222-9455. And, of course, that can be used by people who are listening live on the Internet, where this program is heard around the world. But if you're in the continental U.S., you can use that number to make a toll-free call. Again, 1-800-222-WILL. And you are listening to WILL AM 580 and 90.9 FM HD3 Urbana. Well, back to Cliff. Cliff, you were just talking before we left about the problem of evil. Is this more or less of a problem for an agnostic who's a Christian?
I think many Christians don't question, and they just simply accept it and don't probe the issue. I think it's more of a problem probably for an agnostic. Doubts can be debilitating if they go too far. But doubts can also be enabling. They can shed light upon a subject. The use of the mind is something that a lot of churches insist you not do. You simply accept the dogma. You check your brain at the church house door. I'm just not built that way.
We have a caller waiting to join our conversation on line number 1 from Savoy. Go ahead. You're on the air with Cliff Jackson.
Well, thank you. There are 3 parts to my interest here. The biggest one is, what do you think it is about the people that leaves them so susceptible to these fake Christians on the televangelism networks? And related to that, let's just leave it at that, and we'll...
Okay, so why don't you stay on the line, and if you have a follow-up, you can respond after Cliff says his thoughts.
Thank you.
Okay, I think many people confuse Christianity with magic, and they're looking for magic. They're looking for miracle. Pentecostalism too often deifies experience, just as fundamentalism deifies the Bible. I mean, it's sort of like it's the fourth part of the Godhead. I mean, it's holy, it's inerrant, it's infallible. Well, the Bible itself says that the Word was made flesh, and that was Jesus. The Word, capital W, is not the Bible. But people need hope. Faith stems from hope. Hope stems from faith, and they want to believe the seemingly impossible. It's it's part of our human nature, I think. And these people are very smooth. I mean, they're appealing to people's greed, to their self-interest. It's a very deceptive and manipulative practice, I think, that's crept into the church.
Well, hello?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, related to this, some decades ago, I don't really have any ability to say approximately when, there was some big comeuppance that occurred, and there were some actual congressional hearings, and Orwell got up there and sort of begged the Congress people not to mess with things and change things. Do you remember what that was?
Yes, I do. Senator Grassley of Iowa had a committee that investigated a number of these big evangelists. I think it did include Oral Roberts. It included Benny Hinn. It included Mike Murdoch. It included, well, I forget, Kenneth Copeland, I know. But, you know, we're dealing with issues of the Constitution that provides for the separation of church and state, and these people hide behind that. But for that, a lot of what they do in the name of God, in the name of religion, in the name of Jesus, would be nothing more than federal crimes of wire fraud or mail fraud, I think, quite frankly. But with our Constitution in place, you know, people are free to gull the gullible, particularly in the religious community, as ultimately it ended up with no action being taken. Some of the ministries were transparent. Kenneth Copeland, for example, refused to disclose anything to the committee.
Did you remember?
And yet he has, I think, five corporate jets. You know, it just goes on, and it's just sickening.
Yeah, it is. I completely agree with you. It is really, really sickening. Did you say, do you remember about when that was?
Well, I think the committee just ended up maybe even earlier this year. I mean,
no, this was one. I'm trying to remember one way back.
Well, it went on for a number of years.
Oh.
Yeah, it went on for a number of years, and they collected information and finally sort of folded. It didn't lead to the result that I hoped it would.
Would you happen to have a good guess as to when Oral got up there and did his thing in front of him?
No, I don't know, but Oral's good at doing his thing. And by the way, he's one of the chief culprits in this seed faith thing that he promotes. You know, you plant a seed, that's a translation meaning send me money, and you will get rich.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
really...
And other people have picked up on that, and they just milk it for all it's worth.
Well, it's at least unchristian, but I think it deserves even worse words. Thank you very much.
Well, I agree with you.
Appreciate the call. Thank you very much. And again, other callers, 333-9455 if you're in the 217 area code, elsewhere 1-800-222-9455. You said, Cliff, earlier that Pentecostalism deifies experience. Emotions do play an important part in spirituality and religion, many different faiths. How can we judge good, positive emotions, ones that we can trust and ones that are going to get us into real big trouble?
Well, I don't know, but when I say it deifies experience, I mean that it's at the fringes of Pentecostalism, there's constantly a search for some new thing. You know, for example, one of the latest things way out on the fringe is holy laughter, quote unquote. You know, where people just laugh hysterically. You know, but you know, I affirm emotionalism. I mean, it's not something that I'm condemning. I think it is an aspect of worship, and I could not personally, perhaps because of my background, really attend a church that focused solely on reason as the way to reach God. I mean, I think there is a place for the heart to worship God. Now, how do you distinguish? I think most people are sincere, they're honest. You know, they're not faking it. I'm not saying this of the people of Pentecostals. They're not. I mean, it's real. But some of the evangelists and the televangelists simply take it too far. And I don't think they're real. I think it's fake, phony, and it's just sad to me to watch, watch them gull the people.
You mentioned attending church. Does a Christian existentialist like yourself, a Christian agnostic, find a community to worship with, or do you?
Oh, that is a hard one, Steve. No, I don't, because I don't fit in anywhere. I mean, the truth is, I really don't fit in anywhere. So the answer is no. I guess out of all the ministers I know, the person with whom I would most identify would be Dr. Lloyd John Ogilvie, who's a Presbyterian, used to be pastor of Hollywood First Presbyterian Church, was dean of or chaplain of the United States Senate for a number of years in the 1990s, and he's a charismatic Presbyterian. So he employs both his heart and his mind in his faith, and it shows. I mean, he is like a college professor I had years ago, about the closest to a Christ-like person that I know. I mean, he is authentic, and that's the highest compliment I can pay to a minister, to say, you're authentic, you're real, you reflect Christ.